What are we looking at in the next 4 years under a Donald Trump administration when it comes to the principles of freedom? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this issue of the Libertarian Angle, the show that you all know brings you the principled and compromising case for the free society. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
It's good to be with you and our viewers and listeners in this new year,
Yeah, thank you
entering
very
soon
much.
the second quarter of the 21st century.
Yeah, and a year in which we now have a new president, Richard. So this will be our first broadcast of Libertarian Angle since Donald Trump was sworn in as president once again. So we have Trump as president, presumably for the next 4 years. He delivered a speech before the inauguration. He delivered his inaugural speech, and then he issued a bunch of executive orders that he had promised to deliver. He issued a pardon for Ross Ulbricht, libertarian Bitcoin uh, person. And so we have a lot to talk about. But why don't we put things in an overall context first with respect to what Trump envisions for America, his plan to make America great again, the adulation that all of his MAGA supporters have for him, and then we'll move into the executive orders of specific aspects of what he was doing. So why don't you take the lead here, Richard? Tell us a little bit about your take on President President Bush, sorry, Freudian slip, President Trump and his vision for making America great again.
Well, let me put this in a wider context before I do that, and ask if we could go back in a time machine, let's say to the early 19th century, the 1820s, 18 teens, and let's suppose that we had asked someone like Thomas Jefferson, for instance, just to pick one famous founding father. Um, if we asked what the average American of that time thought what it meant for America to be great, my understanding of the history and the ideas of that period would suggest something like the following. Uh, America is a place that is a new haven, a new land. And it's because it's a place where people could escape from tyranny, oppression, paternalism, control over their lives, direction of their lives. And that in Europe, governments presumed that they knew how to make life richer and better and fairer for people. And that at least the official rhetoric of monarchs was that they did what they did because they were serving the subjects over whom God had assigned them to rule. But here, you didn't need rulers and you didn't need kings. Each man was self-ruling, self-governing. He made his own life. What made America great is that it was a land that gave each individual the liberty to go in his own direction, in his own way, peacefully and honestly, in voluntary association with his fellow human beings, and they made their own greatness. Through the market, one person's success spilled over to the betterment of others, but each individual attempted to pursue his own meaning and context of happiness and greatness for themselves and their loved ones. Now let's fast forward to the last several days of this week. Donald Trump on Sunday gave an address before a enthusiastic crowd the day before his inauguration. And he told us that he had survived the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania because God had protected him because God, had obviously assigned Trump the purpose of making America great again. And what does Trump mean by making America great again? I know who should be allowed into the country and who not. I know how the laws should be enforced to impose this. I know what jobs should be created. I know what industries should develop. I know the technologies that should be fostered and cultivated. I know the next planet to which America should go and plant the flag, as he even said, on Mars. Yes, God has ordained Donald Trump to plant the American flag on Mars. But please, I have to take a moment for my heart to calm down. Now, I don't mean to seem sarcastic, but how often in history have we heard these words out of the mouths of political paternalists, social engineers, dare I even say, tyrants and dictators, who said, I know the purpose of our nation. I know the goals that we should follow. I know what is right. I know what will be uplifting. I know how to design, direct, control, prohibit, command, impose. And while the rhetoric may not be as extreme or as rude and crude as some of the tyrants and the dictators that have occurred during the last 100 years, the theme, the premise, the underlying idea of what is the purpose of government, and those who appoint either themselves or in modern democracy are appointed by the people through elections, what their purposes are to impose greatness. It's the imposer's vision of greatness. It's the imposer's notion of what will make people happy. It is the imposer's idea of what will uplift a life, enrich a life, better a life, make the community of man something special and wonderful and even better than anything in the past. In other words, and then the adulation that is seen with the followers of this individual, the starry-eyed look, this attitude that finally the salvation giver has been reappointed. He is going to lead us into the promised land. He's going to give us the milk and honey. And waiting with salivated confidence that he has the will, the knowledge, the ability, the vision, the power, the strength, the courage to take us where we want to go, but clearly we don't have the power to take ourselves. That underlying premise of the role of a leader and a government is not that of the founding fathers. It is the mentality of the political controller, the planner, and the dictator. Now, I know the left has bandied this word around a lot. Oh, Trump is a would-be dictator. It's not so much whether someone, particularly in our modern democracies, wraps himself in the actual institutional forms of the traditional notion of a Mussolini, a Hitler, a Stalin. That's not what's important. Regardless of whether it's soft or hard, it's the notion of the powers the individual presumes that he should have and he will take upon himself and impose on everybody because he knows what's better for everyone than everyone themselves. And this is the perversity of it. How many of Trump's followers have resisted and opposed everything that has gone on during the last 4 years under the Biden administration? How dare he tell me what words I can speak, what job I can have, what wage I can be earned, who can be accepted at college, the way I can associate with people. Who is he to tell us? And they don't want that. But what they want is the person who will impose and establish for everyone what they want a political leader to establish as the vision for all. And it's that mentality of a loss of appreciation of what liberty really means, that freedom resides in an individual or it resides nowhere. Either each individual has the liberty to plan and direct and give happiness meaning, an attempt for a feeling of greatness, accomplishment, achievement, fulfillment for themselves, or it doesn't exist. Another person cannot make you happy. Another person cannot give you success. In the sense of success is something that arises from an achievement of your own mind, of your own efforts. Why should we think that it is possible for someone else to give us greatness or happiness or a sense of accomplishment and achievement merely because he is wrapped in the garb of a political office that has the power to use force to make us all conform to what he thinks we should have if we choose not to voluntarily, with enthusiastic euphoria, follow him in that direction? It's that mindset that on both the part of the leader and the followers, that is the opposite of what liberty stands for, in my humble opinion. And it's that traditional notion that we have to somehow get our American fellow citizens to both appreciate again and to understand and to realize that whether it's a Biden or a Trump, that is the wrong path. And all they're arguing about is what they'll impose upon us in the name of each of them promising us greatness and happiness, but not the fundamental issue. Should you be making these decisions about purpose, meaning, fulfillment, happiness, greatness for yourself in your own life as you see fit, in voluntary association with your fellow men, or you to follow a path where another determines it for you and takes you there, whether you want to or not, and whether you're enthusiastic or not, or oppose it or not? One is liberty, the other has the potential for tyranny.
Well, you raised some very deep thoughts here, and let me respond positively to what you say by analyzing it from a different perspective. I mean, you and I have been advancing liberty, genuine liberty, for 36 years here at FFF, or you did partly at Hillsdale College and at the Foundation for Economic Education. And one of the big problems that we've encountered over these last 36 years is that the American people already believe they're free. And so they look at Trump as making America great, as making this free nation great. And that's a big obstacle, Richard. When somebody thinks he's free and he's not free, how do you convince him he's free? He doesn't want to be convinced he's free. This was my problem before I discovered libertarianism. I had no doubts I lived in a free country. I'd been taught that since the first grade. There was no doubts. I remember reading a book called A Time for Truth before I discovered libertarianism by William Simon. A friend recommended it to me. I was in my late 20s, and I said, "Hey, Jack, I really enjoyed this book, but what's all this stuff about a free society, and we've got to strive for a free society? We live in a free society." It wasn't powerful enough to break through the indoctrination. Then a while later, I don't know, a year or so later, I discovered libertarianism and these hardcore purist essays, the kind that we've been putting out for 36 years here at FFF. And that broke through, that cracked the indoctrination. All right, how do we do that with most America? I would say if you did a survey of the American people, at least 80% would say we live in a free society, we have a free enterprise system. So if you take what you're saying about each person, freedom involves pursuing your own ideals, your own principles, and so forth. How does that reconcile with what the type of society we live in, which is a massive welfare state? I mean, in a genuinely free society, you've got the right to keep everything you earn and you decide what to do with it. You want to honor your mother and father when they get sick, you choose. You want to help the poor, you choose. That's what you and I would call genuine freedom. And so we don't live in that kind of society. Our American ancestors lived in that kind of society, but we don't. We have a massive system of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education grants, farm subsidies, corporate bailouts. And so how can that be reconciled with what you're saying, where each individual should be free to be doing that? I don't see it's reconcilable. And yet, a lot of libertarians have said, no, the welfare state is a permanent part of American life. We just have to accept that. You guys have been fighting for a free society for 36 years at FFF. We're a long ways away from that. How do we find freedom in an unfree world, as Harry Brown put it in his book? Well, that's not satisfactory for me. I don't give up. I mean, I'm a lot older than I was when I was back in my 20s and I discovered libertarianism. But there were people back there saying, well, we can't achieve it in the short term, Jacob, but you young people, you guys got a good chance of achieving freedom. And now I hear the same thing. Oh, no, hey, freedom, we're going to depend on the young people. Bull. I think that we need to keep doing what we've been doing, and Americans have to do some soul searching in along the lines with that you're talking about. What do you want in society? You want a great leader, you want a dictator, you want somebody to impose his values, whether he's a Democrat or a Republican, or do you want the kind of society that Richard and I are talking about, where you are free to decide for yourself what to do with your own money, with your own values, with your own decisions? And that to me is what we need to be doing. And now, granted, there may be opportunities to improve the serfdom under which we live, and I have no doubts that we live under serfdom. And yeah, are there ways to improve that? Absolutely. Just like there were ways to improve slavery, fewer lashings, better food, better conditions. But our job is to continue doing essentially what Ludwig von Mises was doing, or Leonard Read. I mean, these guys inspired me because they never let up in terms of what a genuinely free society is. And that's where the soul searching that every American has to engage in. Number one, are you really free or not? Are Jacob and Richard just, pie in the sky stuff, or are they really describing what it means to be free? That's the first thing. Are you free or not? Secondly, if you decide you're free, well, then that's it. It's over. That debate's over. It's Goethe. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. But if you decide you're not free, then do you want to be free? Why should you want to be free? To pursue your own life, to pursue your own decisions. God gave us one life to live. And the way I figure it is, it's got to be a very exhilarating feeling to live a life of a free person. And so, Mises never stopped putting out the vision of what a genuinely free society was. The same with Leonard Read, same with other libertarians. And I think that's what we need to keep doing, not just because there is a possibility that life can turn on a dime where people say, yeah, these guys are right. We need to strive for a free society, but also because it's just the right thing to do, Richard.
Well, this is not unique to Americans. Um, Shortly after the Second World War, a book appeared called "They Thought They Were Free," and it was written by an American whose original parentage was from Germany, who could not understand why people supported Hitler, and thought that was free. And he went to what was relatively immediately post-war Germany, West Germany, and had talked to people of various walks of life and tried to analyze what is it that they made them think they're free. One element was freedom was viewed as collective rather than individual. The German people, the German nation, the German race. And that this attitude that if America is great, it only comes through collective greatness. If America is to be free, it can only come through nationalist freedom. America is strong. America grabs things that it considers it needs, as if America has a consciousness and needs Greenland, Panama, this, that, and the other. And the German people need more land. The German people need military strength. And that's what makes you as an individual, because your freedom and your sense of identity is inseparable from a sense of collective partnership and, in fact, homogeneity. So that is part of this. He came to the conclusion. And then the idea that how could the individual be responsible for many of these things themselves? Whether it be guaranteed a job or guaranteed health care or retirement or whatever, all those things that had developed in Germany, beginning with Bismarck at the end of the 19th century, 1880s and 1890s. Uh, so that there was another sense of collective freedom, that we are an extended family, and the state assures that the family members do their duty for each other. We all contribute to retirement. We all contribute to healthcare. We all assure each other a job. We. And it is that implicit collectivism that your betterment, your welfare, your self-identity, your sense of happiness and greatness is inseparable from the collective to which you belong. Um, and that is a difficult thing to break out of. Um, but I think that he had the right understanding that it was the cumulative set of mindsets, ideas, cultural presumptions about the individual to others in his community that was the fundamental basis of what enabled Hitler to have his power, and why so many people felt that to just obey the Fuhrer is what gave them real freedom. It's a hard nut to crack, but that's part of what we have to overcome.
Yeah, and I think your point about the way people conflate America and the American people, the government, we're all like one and the
Mhm.
same, is absolutely right on. That we're dealing with two separate entities here. This is what people don't realize. You've got the government and you've got the citizenry. And the fact is that the more powerful your government, this is a thesis I've long held, the weaker your nation. Because with little people, serfs, not great things are going to be accomplished. So the smaller, weaker your government, the stronger your people are. And the best proof that you're dealing with two separate entities is the Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights acknowledges that the the Constitution protects the people from the government.
Yes.
The government is your greatest threat to your freedom and well-being. But when you conflate the two, it's, oh, well, if we make the government stronger and bigger and more powerful, that's increasing the power and the freedom of the American people, which is a ludicrous construct. And a lot of people are willing to sacrifice their freedom for the sake of the security, the safety. That, oh, Jacob, how can you call for the abolition of the welfare state? You can't trust people to be good and caring. And so we have to force them to do so, even if it sacrifices our freedom. Or look at the drug war, Richard. Here's a classic example of the serfs in American society. I mean, how can you possibly have a free society when people are being jailed for ingesting something that the government doesn't approve of? I mean, it's like that didn't even compute for me. So Trump pardons Ross Ulbricht, who was convicted of a drug war related offense, the Silk Road thing. And there's people out there, libertarians. Oh, thank you, President Trump. Thank you so much. To me, one should never express gratitude to the slave master. Nobody belongs in jail for a drug war offense. Nobody. And the fact that he's released one person, Biden released 2,500 drug war defendants. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, thank you for being so kind to us, so benevolent to us. None of these people belonged in jail in the first place. And when Trump was in office, 8 years ago, he should have pardoned Ross Ulbricht and every other drug war defendant there. At the very least, the ones were convicted of nonviolent offenses. And that's where we've got to go off on this thing, is that if we're going to achieve a free society, we have to identify what the infringements on freedom are and then make the case for dismantling them, so that rather than, oh, lower mandatory minimum sentences or a few more pardons, uh, or asset forfeiture laws should be repealed, we need to be making the case that the government has no role in a free society of jailing people for ingesting wrong substances. And so and if you take the border issue, look at how many people are willing to sacrifice their liberty for the sake of so-called security, safety. The militarization of the border, that was one of his executive orders. He's going to send more military. There's already military down there, but How in the world can anyone be considered to be living in a free society when he's living under a militarized society? How's that work, Richard? I don't get it.
The same things. He talks about making America wealthy and prosperous again, but at the expense of allowing individuals to freely and peacefully decide to whom they want to sell and from whom they want to buy, and to make this distinction that this person you can buy from at this price, but you cannot buy from that person at that price because he's a foreigner who does things that I, meaning the president, doesn't like or thinks is wrong, and therefore I'm going to impose an import tax on that producer to harm him and make him pay, which is itself a fallacy as to who pays the tax at the end of the day, and deny you the freedom of choice as a peaceful, honest individual to decide who you want to associate with. Not just who you want to associate with in a hobby club, but who you want to buy from to see that the income that you've honestly earned to support you and your own family can be used to get the most out of what it can purchase. This is a better product. This is a less expensive product. This economizes on the income I've worked hard to earn so I can buy this and that, which otherwise I can't if the price is noticeably higher because of this tax. In other words, in the name of economic liberation for all of us, he's basically enslaving each of us to the narrow confines of what he, Donald Trump, thinks the exchanges and the transactions that he's decided is good or bad, as he thinks it is, not how each individual finds it advantageous, desirable, and worthwhile for themselves. It is unfreedom to do so.
That's a great point. And it was fascinating also on the tariffs is that he's doing it through executive orders. I mean,
Yes.
isn't it supposed to be Congress that decides the level of taxation and the nature of taxation? I mean, isn't that what a democratic republic is all about, where the Congress enacts the laws and the president signs them into law? He's issuing these as decree laws.
Yes.
That is what Pinochet called them, decree laws. Now it's because I think Congress has delegated this authority to him, but why would Congress even do such a thing? And you're right. I mean, he's trying to harm people, and in the process, he's destroying the freedom of the American people. I mean, think of the ideal here, Richard, that you and I are talking about. A world in which people are free to travel and trade wherever they want with whomever they want. So you've got people in China or Iran or Russia or Venezuela or whatever. They may have autocratic regimes, totalitarian regimes, but you've got a harmony of interests that are taking place because people are free to travel there. Americans are and sell things and buy things. Where the government of the United States is not waging war and trying to harm foreign citizens under this imperialist mindset that, oh, they're a rival or they're a competitor and so forth. This collectivist notion, as you mentioned, instead an individualist notion where the United States is leading the world as to what the principles of freedom are. And one of those essential principles is the freedom of people to travel and trade wherever they want and with whomever they want.
Yes, the tragedy of the next 4 years, in my humble opinion, given the mindset of our new president, is that while he will often use the rhetoric, as both of us have been trying to explain, of freedom and liberation and greatness and prosperity, it is a greatness and a liberation that, in fact, will, in many, many ways, continue to take us down a path in which each of us have less chances for our individual happiness, greatness, and that, in fact, will make us less liberated rather than more.
I agree. I think we're looking for 4 years of constant crises, chaos. We haven't even mentioned the national security state. I mean, I consider that the greatest mistake America has ever made was converting our government from a limited government republic to a national security state with the powers of assassination, torture, indefinite detention, all these foreign military bases, incursions. The enemies will change, the opponents will change, the rivals will change, or some will overlap with the Biden administration. But I think that we're looking at a constant series of chaos and crises, including fiscal crises. I mean, $36 trillion in debt. That's not going to go down here. And he's already, as you and I have talked about in previous shows, he's talking about abolishing the debt ceiling entirely. So but it's all in their interests in the government sector, these crises and chaos, because then they get people to say, we want the leader, we want the man on the white horse. You see this on the border. They've produced this chaos and crisis for some 80 years. I grew up on the border. I saw that chaos and crisis. It's never gone away. They used their own chaos and crisis, including through sanctions on countries like Venezuela and so forth, to then use as the excuse to destroy our freedoms, much to the acclaim and clapping of people who are there supporting the destruction of our rights and liberties in the ostensible purpose of being kept safe and secure.
Well, I think we're certainly going to have a few passing issues to criticize over the next few years.
Likely. Okay, on that note, we'll wrap things up. Richard, as always, I greatly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you all very much for tuning in and for supporting our work. We're very, very grateful. And Richard, I look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.